Welcome to MojoPlays, and today we're showcasing the most successful indie games ever released, from both a financial and critical standpoint. To clarify, when we say indie, we mean the modern definition that began to take form in the 2000s. But before we get into it, we publish new content all week long. So be sure to subscribe and ring the bell to get notified about our latest videos. Braid. With its time-bending mechanics and charming storybook art style, Braid made a huge impact when it was released in 2008. Pretty much everyone who played it thought the world of it, and creator Jonathan Blow and his team earned multiple awards for their efforts. Not only that, but Braid earned around $6 million, a sizable chunk of cash for a self-published game back then that Blow used to finance his next game. It's considered by many to be an influential stepping stone in moving indie games into the mainstream. Sadly, the 2024 remaster didn't fare so well, with Blow referring to sales as, quote, utterly terrible. Still, as far as the original goes, it deserves its inclusion and our respect. Celeste. For fans of ultra-hard platformers, 2018's Celeste more than delivered mechanically. But it also had a touching story at its heart that made it resonate deeply with players and carried it into the limelight. Madeline's struggle to reach the mountain's peak garnered rave reviews from all outlets and earned a passionate following of speedrunners. That's not to mention several awards, including indie accolades at the DICE and Game Awards, as well as endless praise for Lena Raine's incredible score. At 1 million copies sold within its first 2 years, there are certainly higher-selling indie games on our list. But the sheer amount of love Celeste has gained from the industry and its community can't be ignored. Cave Story. During the birth of the modern indie game era, one game paved the way for future possibilities, and that game was Cave Story. Long before every other indie release was a Metroidvania, Cave Story perfected the format with incredible level design and gameplay that made it near impossible to put down. All this glory from a one-man development team in Daisuke Amaya. While it was initially only released on PC in Japan, Nicalis worked with Amaya to bring it to other platforms around the world, including an enhanced port and a 3D version for Nintendo's handheld. These days, it's still considered a monumental turning point in indie game development. Castle Crashers. Sometimes a game does something so well that you just want to keep playing it forever. Castle Crashers was released in 2008. With a silly medieval premise, wacky sense of humor, and addictive multiplayer mechanics, it instantly blew up on Xbox Live Arcade. If you had a 360 and were a fan of beat-em-ups, chances are good you got sucked right in. It was so easy to pick up and play with friends or strangers, garnering a ton of love in an era where these types of games had mostly disappeared. By 2019, the game had sold 20 million copies, and we doubt its legacy will ever fade. Palworld. Ah yes, the Pokemon with Guns game. Everyone knew what to expect when Palworld released in early 2024, and as the game's sales show, it's also exactly what they wanted. This blend of adorable critters with massive weapon armories is undeniably absurd. But most players couldn't refuse the allure and were happy to fork over their hard-earned cash to developer and publisher Pocket Pair, who has since released several updates and expansions. Palworld sold 8 million copies during its first week on Steam, and after a month, it had climbed to 15 million. While its player base has since declined and we doubt it'll be much of an award winner, those numbers cannot be denied. Human Fall Flat. For some games, all it takes is a simple yet addictive premise to pull in millions of players. No Breaks Games' Human Fall Flat is a puzzler that uses physics-based gameplay to get through a variety of obstacles. For the vast majority of them, multiple solutions exist, which is precisely where the fun comes from. With so many ways to complete puzzles, you're given freedom to tackle them how you see fit. While it wasn't nearly as big a critical darling as others on this list, Human Fall Flat has outsold nearly all of them. By the end of 2023, it had sold 50 million copies across a plethora of platforms, and a sequel is currently in development. No Man's Sky. With its disappointing launch far in the rearview, No Man's Sky has long been heralded now as one of the best live service games on the market. Even at the start, anticipation was so high that it sold mountains of copies. However, those sales likely would have ceased there if not for developer and publisher Hello Games' continued support, updates, and expansions. That all being free certainly doesn't hurt matters either. Over the years, the game has brought in tons of new players and revenue, as well as earned multiple awards, most of which have been for its evolution and ongoing nature. Terraria. "2D action games are a dime a dozen in the indie space, but Terraria has a variety of elements that make it stand out. Within its procedurally generated biomes, players have loved getting lost while exploring, crafting, and battling hordes of monsters that stand in their way. Since its release in 2011, developer Relogic has also issued several updates that have added new enemies, weapons, modes, gameplay elements, and quality of life features, delighting longtime fans and bringing in tons of new ones. Across the multitude of platforms you can find it on, Terraria has sold nearly 60 million copies as of 2024. The Binding of Isaac. Originally developed as a Flash game, The Binding of Isaac blended the structure of classic Zelda games with roguelike style and a twisted premise. As players took the unfortunate Isaac through a monster-infested dungeon, they basked in its dark, bizarre nature and challenging difficulty, and that brought the developers endless success. The game has since gone on to be remade in 2014, with Rebirth also receiving several well-received expansions as its player base grew, one of which let those players create their own content to suck them in even further. With so many characters, monsters, power-ups, and ways to play, The Binding of Isaac has retained a thriving following over the years. Super Meat Boy. In 2010, there was simply nothing like Super Meat Boy. Across a multitude of brutal platforming levels, the unwavering Meat Boy braved nearly every type of trap to rescue his girlfriend Bandage Girl from the vile Dr. Fetus. Unapologetically weird in its setup, what truly had players unable to step away was its beautiful simplicity and agonizingly difficult obstacles. Every level was something to be conquered, which means they all gave players bite-sized levels of satisfaction upon completion that added up to a phenomenal experience. It sold 1 million copies within 2 years of release, and has kept growing in popularity, even getting a sequel in 2020. Rocket League. As it would turn out, blending rocket-powered derby cars with football, or soccer for those of you in the States, was a genius idea. Psyonix's Rocket League shot into the popularity stratosphere when it was released in 2015, where it has remained for years. Through constant updates with new modes and vehicles spanning all corners of pop culture, it became an unstoppable multiplayer juggernaut. Within 3 years of its release, it had amassed 10 million copies and became a bona fide esports title. That's not to mention a lot of love from critics, as well as multiple Best Sports Game and Post-Launch Support awards from different organizations. Hades. Supergiant made a name for itself with isometric action games, but Hades was something special. It was instantly praised for not only how it adapted figures from Greek mythology, but how its stories, characters, and mechanics evolved through the roguelike process of dying over and over again. The incredible music, art style, and voice acting only solidified its greatness. While in early access, it sold 700,000 copies and reached 1 million only 3 days after its official launch. It then went on to win a bevy of Best Indie awards, as well as those that highlighted its performances, design, and writing. To the surprise of no one, a sequel was announced 2 years later.
And fear is for the weak. Take care, Achilles.
Among Us. While it wasn't initially a big success, Among Us later proved it just arrived a little too early. When the COVID-19 pandemic hit in 2020, and many of us turned to video games as a way to stay connected, that's when the game blew up. Through streamers on Twitch and YouTube, it found a huge audience, and that got developer Innersloth the recognition it deserved. The same year it gained popularity, it reached 10 million sales on Steam alone, and earned a few awards in the process. It was so successful that Innersloth was able to create its own publishing division, and an animated series is currently in the works. Cuphead. As soon as we got a look at Studio MDHR's Cuphead, we knew it was going to be a hit. The old-timey hand-drawn animation and music immediately got everyone interested. Even the intense difficulty of its bosses couldn't keep swarms of players from diving in. Unsurprisingly, it earned multiple awards for its art style, animation, and music. Speaking of which, its soundtrack was the best-selling jazz album in years. By 2020, Cuphead had reached 6 million copies sold, and in 2022, it got both an animated adaptation from Netflix and an expansion, the equally challenging Delicious Last Course. Whether the studio develops a sequel or a different hand-drawn masterpiece next, Cuphead is an impressive foundation. Hollow Knight. Speaking of hand-drawn masterpieces, Team Cherry's Hollow Knight stunned players with its wonderful, macabre setting and level design that kept us all digging deeper. The mysteries of Hallownest paired incredibly well with the Metroidvania structure, while its tough difficulty made beating every boss and obstacles satisfying. 2 years after release, it had sold around 3 million copies, earned a few notable awards, and seen 4 DLC expansions, all of which were released for free. It has also garnered a passionate following of fans, who consider it not only one of the best indies, but one of the best video games in general. Team Cherry announced a sequel, Silk Song, in 2019, though as of writing, we're still waiting on a release date. Stardew Valley. Filling the void left by Harvest Moon, Stardew Valley became the farming sim to end all others. Its premise is as simple as it should be. Your grandpa leaves you a rundown farm in a small town, an opportunity to escape the overbearing city life. It is undeniably quaint and relaxing, but the game expands in unique directions as you continue to play. You'll unlock new areas, delve into caves with deadly monsters in search of resources, connect with the surprisingly touching townsfolk, and, if you so choose, even marry and have children with one of them. Developer Concerned Ape has also kept updating the game for free over the years to the joy of many, and by 2024, it had sold 30 million copies. Shovel Knight. With Shovel Knight, Yacht Club Games took all the best elements from NES action platformers and blended them into one glorious concoction. It was exactly what the industry needed, being funded through one of the most successful Kickstarter campaigns at that point. Its visuals, gameplay, music, and the dastardly Order of No Quarter were all instantly praised as great replicas from games of old. Simply put, it was just a blast to play. Naturally, Yacht Club supported the game for several years through DLC featuring new campaigns that focused on some of the villains, and it produced a couple of spin-offs as well. Shovel Knight himself became a star, making cameo appearances in multiple games both big and small. Undertale. There are untold numbers of AAA games that could never dream of matching the cultural impact of Undertale. Inspired by his love of Earthbound, Toby Fox created a strange, lovable world filled with oddly deep characters and some of the best video game music we've ever heard. The way it adapts to how you play, leading to different paths, has inspired unwavering love in players, many of whom have paid tribute with mountains of artwork, fan videos, and even their own games. The cult following of Undertale continues to grow years after release, with Fox also creating a spiritual successor in Deltarune to deepen their admiration. Five Nights at Freddy's. Not only did Scott Cawthon create a ridiculously popular horror game in Five Nights at Freddy's, but its success led to one of the biggest video game franchises in the world. The concept of taking something many of us experienced in childhood and turning it evil, in this case a group of animatronic animal friends, is something many have tried to replicate since, though none have quite measured up. Sure, it wasn't as big a critical success as other indie games, but that hardly matters when it has earned boatloads of money, spin-offs, novels, and even a live-action movie adaptation from Blumhouse in 2023. It doesn't seem like Freddy will be slowing down anytime soon. Minecraft. While this list isn't necessarily ranked, Minecraft is objectively the most successful indie game that has ever been released. Created by Marcus Notch Persson and officially released in 2011, the sandbox survival game has only managed to grow bigger and bigger. Microsoft bought the IP in 2014 for $2.5 billion, and it has since become the best-selling video game of all time, with 300 million copies sold as of 2023. We've seen it cross over with everything from Super Mario to SpongeBob to Fallout. There have also been a ton of updates to it over the years that have only made it easier to spend hours upon hours meticulously building worlds. Additionally, it has its own convention, a few spin-offs, and is getting a live-action movie adaptation in 2025. What other indie games blew up to mainstream success, and which have you supported since the beginning? Let us know in the comments, and be sure to subscribe to MojoPlays for more great gaming videos every day.
Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, there's more where that came from.